Battlestar Galactica by Glenn A. Larson and Robert Thurston. Chapter 6. Part 2. On the bridge of the Galactica, Adama and Ty listened to the communications among the three ships avidly. When Apollo proposed running a path through the minefield, Ty looked panicked. "Shall I tell them to abort the mission, sir?" he asked Adama. "We can't. Apollo has full authority." "But we've got to stop him. This is too reckless, Colonel." "There's no way we can stop him. Not only is it essential that we get our ships through the minefield, Apollo has a great deal to prove." "What does he prove by killing himself?" Adama shrugged, resigning from the argument. The truth was too painful to admit. Apollo might just like to kill himself in the middle of a bold, heroic exploit. It would at least prove to the others that he was not, after all, the vassal to his father's tyrant king, doing Adama's bidding in a vast plot to deceive everybody. Everybody watched the massive screen at the top of the console silently as the three sleek, delta-winged ships angled through the minefield, which was now brightly lit by two activated light mines. The three pilots were firing everything they had, and with stunning accuracy. Mine after mine exploded and disappeared. Suddenly, when it became clear that Apollo's foolhardy plan was going to work, a cheer went up among the bridge crew. "I don't know what to say, Commander," Ty said. "They're clearing the path."
"Now that's precision flying,"
Athena said from her post, smiling at her father. It was one of his phrases, and she meant it affectionately. Starbuck's voice came over the communicator. "I can't see a blessed thing. Are we hitting anything?" "Be hanged if I know," Apollo said. "But it's cooling off. I do believe we made it."
"Yahoo!"
screamed Boomer. Then all their voices chattered together, and the exuberance of their three young heroes buoyed up the spirits of everyone on the Galactica. Since the fleet of human survivors had disappeared, activity aboard the Cylon base ships had declined, leaving Imperious Leader more time for speculation about the minor failures within his otherwise enormously successful plan. He knew there could not be many human ships left. Yet where were they? If the Cylon culture had had any inclination toward proverbs, they might have felt that they were looking for a needle in a haystack, although haystacks were non-existent on Cylon worlds, where grotesque livestock were fed blocks of nutritive substances through an osmotic process, and where needles had no point, literally and figuratively. Perhaps the humans had worked up some kind of force field camouflage. Imperious Leader's spy network had discovered clues that they had such a capability, and he had ordered his experts to develop anti-camouflage devices. He had not had a transmission from them since. The leader was not so much disturbed by the technology causing the humans' disappearance as by the fact that they continued to keep out of sight. Baltar might have said it was the famous human resourcefulness, implying that resourcefulness had been a key human trait throughout their history. A human, Baltar had said once, was never so confident as when he had his back against the wall. A pompous outcry of arrogance, of course, no more than could be expected from the smug human traitor, but still a troublesome concept. The image especially bothered the leader. A Cylon arranged matters so that his back was never against a wall. He either plunged forward to his death or emerged victorious. There was little middle ground, but humans were always finding middle grounds. Curious. A message came along the network from an executive officer. Some explosions had been registered near Carrion. Evidently some mines set in the protective field around the planet had been set off or had malfunctioned. On occasion that minefield caught and eliminated space pirates who had heard rumors about Carrion. Whether the humans had anything to do with the present series of explosions was debatable. However, the leader ordered intense surveillance because of the importance of the Tilium mining complex there. In all the years of the war, the humans had not discovered that Carrion was a prime source of fuel supply for their enemy. Nevertheless, a sneak trip to Carrion might be exactly what the devious Adama might be attempting now. This war with the humans must end for once and for all, the leader thought. It had gone on too long, used up too much of Cylon resources. He wished to get back to the proper business of his leadership, to seek out the cracks and flaws in the unity and organization of his own race, to make the concepts of peace and order the synonyms they should be. Even now, in some Cylon worlds, the human practice of monogamy had been communicated to certain sectors of the population, and they were busy practicing it. Monogamy went against the basic concepts of the network of Cylon civilization, where it was vital that every Cylon attempt and complete as many forms or degrees of contact as possible. Monogamy contained in its disagreeable structure too many forms and degrees of limited contact. A state imperious leader could not abide, and he vowed to severely punish those Cylons practicing it when he could afford to devote attention to domestic matters again. He ordered his executive officers to keep him well informed with any clue that might suggest the invisible fleet's whereabouts. There would be no more middle grounds, not with the surviving humans. After preliminary scanning by a scouting patrol of Red Squadron planes, the livery ships were cleared to land. It was considered essential to provide the animals with some grazing and eating room. The livery ship officers had reported an increased listlessness in their animals, one which seemed to be caused by something more than just the limited rations available to feed them. The farming ships landed soon after, and took immediate advantage of Carrion's fertile soil, whose texture and mineral content indicated a fine medium for the planting of accelerated growth foodstuffs. At the same time, the farmer technicians collected as much grazing material from the Carrion surface as they could, and transplanted it to the meadows inside the livery ships. While Carrion was proving exceptionally fruitful for livestock and for farming, it didn't impress some of its human visitors, especially Boomer and Starbuck, who had been dispatched to the dark side of the planet to investigate mining possibilities. "I'll be sure to come here on my next rest and recuperation leave," Boomer commented. "I just adore monotonous landscapes." "Yes, it's lovely," Starbuck said. "Can't imagine why it isn't overpopulated." A pilot on a Viper flyby informed them that his scanners read life forms in an area a short distance from where Boomer and Starbuck were driving in their land ram. Boomer broadcast the specified time check to the main expeditionary force and announced they would investigate the lifeform report. Starbuck accelerated the land ram and headed for the area the pilot had indicated. "If this place is so bloomin' rich in resources, how come it was abandoned in the first place?" Boomer asked. Starbuck shrugged. "Legend has it the mining and colonization groups both got spooked and pulled out. Probably that's just a story, though. Looks to me like the planet was just too drab. In those days, sources of supply were plentiful. Plus, it's off the normal trade routes. So I suppose Carrion was just written off as a bad investment." "Then why does the old man think it's such a good investment now?" "It's the only investment, Boomer. That's what he'd tell you." "Yeah, he does have a penchant for finality, the commander does." "Yeah, well, hey, will you look at that? That glow over that hill. What could that be?" "I don't know, but it's what we're sent out here to investigate." Starbuck coaxed extra speed out of the land ram as they headed toward the aurora framing the hill ahead of them. Not far from Boomer and Starbuck, the main body of the Galactica's survey team were coordinating their detection equipment to search for the fabled lost carrion Tillium mine. From the point of view of a quartet of rather large insectoids who were spying on the Galactica's force from a nearby mountain, the humans themselves looked like small insects. Organized and disciplined small insects. Each of these spies was about 5 feet tall, with large, bulbous eyes near the top of oval heads, long, thin trunks, and 4 arms, all of which were busy with either 2 triggered weapons or several lensed cameras. One of the insectoids took aim at the formidable target of Lieutenant Jolly, but another one pushed the barrel of the weapon down. Cetal, a leader of the race called the Ovions, by the few humans unlucky enough to encounter them, had for the moment decided not to kill any of the invaders. At least, not until she reported back to her queen. She gestured her soldiers back, took the camera from the Ovion who held it, and in the soft monosyllabic language of her race, ordered them away from the spying post. At a nod from Cetal, another Ovion used all 4 of her hands to turn in different directions, and at different speeds, a series of 4 wheels concealed underneath a rock. With a just audible whine, an opening appeared in the ground, and the Ovions disappeared into it. Riding on a pod whose soft leaves sheltered them totally, the 4 Ovions progressed through a long, descending subterranean passageway to a cell where the pod opened and they stepped out of it. The tunnel they now traveled through was walled with cell-like panels from which amber light glowed. They emerged from the passageway into an immense underground cavern. The giant, many-celled chamber went deeper into the ground than Cetal's keen eyes could see, and ascended almost as high. There were countless levels, each one ringed with compartments shaped like honeycomb. Within the compartments, Ovion workers poked at walls, extracted nuggets of amber-colored ore, and placed them in small, many-wheeled vehicles, which other workers continually drew in and out of the compartments and sent on through dark, intervening corridors. To an outsider, this large-chambered mine might have looked quite nightmarish, but to Cetal, something of an aesthete among her people, it had an artistic coherence that excited her each time she stepped into it. Today, however, there was little time for aesthetic satisfaction. She had to continue her mission. She crossed a natural bridge that stretched across the wide chamber. At the guarded archway to Lote's chamber, Cetal's 4 arms provided the proper ritual password, and she was admitted to her queen's presence. The luxury of Lote's throne room contrasted strongly with the austerity of the mine. Finely woven, elaborately patterned cloth decorated the walls and ceiling. Lote herself lounged on a cushioned floor, surrounded by her bejeweled retinue of slaves. One slave played a gentle tune utilizing the Ovion 3-note scale artistically, discovering intriguing variants on her restricted melodic theme. A pair of other slaves were filing down the fine spikes that dotted the surface of Lote's limbs. Another slave held a long tube from which the queen occasionally drew a liquid substance, whose residue she blew out her mouth as smoke. When Lote acknowledged Cetal, she requested her report.
"They have come,"
Cetal said, her voice soft and pleasant. Lote's even more musical voice replied,
"Don't disturb them. It will only stir them up. They'll be perfectly harmless unless angered or frightened." "My thoughts exactly, Highness." "Naturally."
Cetal bowed and withdrew, leaving Lote to draw and puff on the long tube. Apollo felt extremely comfortable at the controls of the landram he had commandeered for his own particular search of the carrion's surface. He liked the feel of a landram as it rode the air currents with a surprising smoothness, adjusting to surface peculiarities with barely noticeable shifts to right and left, up and down. He also felt comfortable with the presence of Serena beside him in the co-driver's seat. He had been impressed with the way she had picked up the skills of driving a landram without ever having been inside one before. In the back seat of the Land Ram, Boxy played quietly with Muffet 2.
"That was some show you and your buddies performed up there,"
Serena said suddenly.
"You seem to be trying to prove something. I wondered if it had anything to do with your brother."
The comment evaporated the feeling of being comfortable. "I get it," he said irritably. "You're saying I'm being reckless to make up for leaving Zack behind."
"Or proving your courage for his ghost."
"How did you find out so much about Zack and me?"
"I asked around."
"I don't appreciate that."
"Sorry, I was a newswoman on Caprica, remember? I can't get out of the habit. Change the subject, why don't you? Or I will. Tell me about the agriculture project. I was especially impressed with it. How long before things start to grow?"
"Oh, say morning. I think we'll see quite a few sprouts and stuff by morning. Then by the end of the day tomorrow, we'll have a whole crop of fresh food, which you must admit will be a welcome substitute for the comm rations. They'll taste better. And you be sure to eat 'em. You hear that, Boxy?"
"I guess so."
In spite of Muffet 2, the boy had still been showing signs of moodiness. "Say, Boxy," Apollo said, "time for your part of the mission. What I want you to do is keep your eye on that readout. If the indicator gets up into this colored area, it means we're right on top of a rich Tillium deposit."
"Yes, sir."
The job assignment seemed to pick up the boy's spirits.
"You sure you don't mind working with such a green crew?"
Serena said. "I chose you, didn't I?"
"I'd think with your connections you'd do better. That you'd... I'm sorry. Didn't mean to touch a sore spot. You're upset your father resigned the presidency, correct?"
"Stop being a newswoman and let's concentrate on the mission. We've got to get a lot done in a short time. We don't dare stop on any one planet for too long."
"Why'd we have to leave home at all?"
Boxy asked.
"Why'd those people want to hurt us?"
"I'm not sure, Boxy. Some say it has to do with very complicated things, political things. Others say the Cylons just like war and will attack anybody who interferes with their part of space. I don't know. Sometimes I think it just boils down to who's different. There are always life forms who cannot accept anything they don't understand. Some humans are like that too. They can't accept anything different."
"What do you mean different?"
Apollo sighed, not knowing how to explain complex matters to a child. He remembered years ago trying to have complicated conversations with Zack, who was then much older than Boxy was now, and then discovering that the answer Zack sought for was much simpler than Apollo expected. Other times Apollo's answers were too simple, and Zack prodded him until he had not only extracted the more complex ideas, but successfully argued against them. But what should he tell a 6-year-old whose main concern was the welfare of an animal about the subject of prejudice? "Well, Boxy, just about anything at all can make one species different from another. The shape of your eyes, the number of limbs, the color of the outer layer of your skin, even thoughts and ideas. Maybe our enemies just aren't equipped to deal with the difference."
"You mean they're stupid?"
"Yeah, in a way. I mean, in some ways they've got it all over us. In certain matters of science and technology, in certain methods of fighting the war, but yeah, they're stupid too. It's stupid to kill what you don't understand."
"Why don't we just kill them back?"
In Boxy's belligerent question, Apollo could hear, almost like a ghost echo, the sound of Zack's voice. Zack sometimes showed a positively bloodthirsty desire for violent solutions. In that sort of mood, he would never listen to the calmer voices of his brother or his father. For that matter, there were times when Adama's humanistic theories of war proved too much for Apollo, who still had sharp pangs of doubt about the Galactica's leaving the scene of the battle. "Boxy, if we just killed mindlessly, the way the Cylons seem to do, then we'd be changing what we are. We'd become like them. Although we're quite skilled at war, we are not basically a warlike race. At least, I don't believe we are. We were pushed into this war, had no other choice. In fact, Perhaps what we're doing now, searching for someplace else, away from our enemies, is the better thing to do. Fighting them on their own terms is not certainly...
What if they come after us?
Why did Boxy have to ask the hard questions? Then we might have to defend ourselves.
You mean kill them?
Possibly.
Then we'd be like them.
Apollo smiled. You know, Boxy, I think you're getting glimpses of just how complicated life is. Yes, we don't believe in war, but the opposite of war isn't necessarily peace. No, what we want is freedom. Just that, freedom. The right to be left alone. It's a right we humans have always tried to protect and preserve. But there's always a chance someone will come along and spoil everything. He could see in the boy's questioning eyes that Boxy was not following this part of the discussion.
So you kill them?
No. What it is, you try to establish, well, penalties. Something that'll make spoiling others' way of life unrewarding.
You kill them.
Boxy, you've a way of reducing everything to very simple terms.
Well, I'm only a kid.
Right. Sometimes I forget you're only 6.
Almost 7.
Almost 7. I don't know, though. Maybe you're right. No matter how you slice it, what words you use, in the end, we're talking about life and death. Life is precious. No one has the right to tamper with another's life without the risk of forfeiting his own. I sound like one of the classes in war games I used to teach back at the academy, and I think getting a bit deep for a boy your age.
Why? You can die at any age, can't you?
Yes, Boxy, you can. Keep an eye on the readout, okay?
Sure. Come on, Muffy. Look at that.
Muffet, too, barked and nuzzled closer to the boy. Starbuck stood at the rim of the hill and stared down at the evidence of genuine life forms that had been registering on the scanners. He called to Boomer, who was just climbing out of the land ram. Boomer! Yeah, what is it now? You aren't going to believe this, Boomer. Feeling is believing. I just busted a finger on... No, I mean really. Boomer looked down. His mouth fell open. I don't believe it. In contrast to the drab landscape around them, the carnival of color and light and glass in the meadow in front of them was a dazzling spectacle. Surrounding glass-walled spherical buildings was a meticulously landscaped garden of greenery and exotic plants. Waterfalls slipped gracefully between what seemed an artistic arrangement of rocks. Sounds of laughter drifted upward. Songs were being played and sung in the distance. A few people, talking gaily, emerged from a building and began to chase each other, with obvious amorous intentions, through the neatly sculptured garden paths. Starbuck looked over at Boomer, who appeared just as confused as he was. Boomer asked, "What is it?" "I don't know," said Starbuck, drawing his sidearm. He started to make his way along the narrow pathway that zigzagged down the hill leading to the bizarre complex of spherical buildings and lush gardens. "You sure you need that?" Boomer said, pointing to Starbuck's sidearm. "Whenever I'm not sure, that's when I need it." Nobody in the garden seemed to notice the two men. If anything, the happy noises of celebration and song grew louder as they reached the garden. They stood at the beginning of a path for a long time, just watching the myriad colors and shifting lights that kept changing the appearance of the garden and the buildings. "It sure is pretty," Starbuck said, some awe in his voice. "And it sure sounds friendly." Starbuck started down the path, Boomer following, staying close. As they came to a fork in the path, a sudden scream made both of them jump. Starbuck whirled around, his sidearm pointed in the direction of the scream. A woman stood trembling in the center of the path. Her wide, staring eyes only emphasized the look of beauty in her face. Starbuck was impressed with her voluptuous figure, round in all the best places. She wore a red gown that clung appropriately.
"Don't shoot,"
she said. What do you want? Starbuck, red-faced, glanced down at the weapon in his hand, made a show of putting it in his holster. I mean no harm, he said.
I usually go on the assumption that men with guns might mean harm, the woman said.
You're from Torah, Starbuck said.
Yes,
the woman said, obviously surprised at the shift in topic.
I'm a Taurus. How did you know that?
The dialect. Always can tell. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? What are you doing here? Why are colonial warriors sneaking around a resort with their weapons drawn? Everything here is perfectly legal. Starbuck and Boomer, both just as bewildered as the woman, exchanged mystified looks.
Isn't it?
Would you mind telling us how you got here? Starbuck said, trying to sound as official as he could under the circumstances.
On the bus.
The incongruity of her answer startled both men. Must have been sniffing plant vapors, Boomer commented. Would you tell us about this bus? Starbuck asked.
Sure. It was all handled through my travel agent. This place is fabulous. I just can't believe they can give you all this for so little money.
She opened a red sequined purse that had been dangling from her wrist.
Look, I won over 1,000 cubits.
Some of the cubits spilled over the edge of the purse onto the path. The woman made no effort to retrieve them. Starbuck, always responsive to the glow of gold, became excited. You won those cubits here?
In there, sure.
The woman pointed toward the complex of varicolored glass buildings.
Look, they said it was all legal, so if it isn't, you'd better take on the whole star system, because everyone is doing it. I'd like to stand here and discuss all this with you, but I'm late for a moonlight cruise. 2 moons, how can you go wrong? And talk about meeting people. The brochures weren't kidding about that. I never had it so good. See you in church, fellas.
The woman giggled and hurried off down the path. Boomer stared after her, while Starbuck picked up the fallen cubits. I don't get it, Boomer said. How cut off can they be? She didn't act like she'd even heard about the war. Yeah, Starbuck said thoughtfully. I wonder if they have. Something else is peculiar about this place. If it's such a big deal, like she said, how come we haven't heard about this place? I suppose you know every gambling den in our star systems? Well, you're right. If there's a game going on, you know about it. Starbuck resumed walking along the path, heading toward the nearest lavish sphere. But this isn't backroom cards, he said. This is the biggest splash I've seen outside of Orion. But who'd want to set up a gambling resort on an outpost planet? Why put something like this together and keep it a secret? That puzzles me too. If you don't tell anyone about a place like this, you don't do any business. As they made their way through the verdant garden and into the lobby of the spherical building, they could see no evidence of security guards to interfere with them. In fact, all they could see were groups of people having a ball, and not only people, as they found when they looked close. There seemed to be representatives of every sentient and civilized extraterrestrial race so far discovered in the universe, except, of course, for Cylons, although even their unlikely presence wouldn't have surprised Starbuck. The Cylon sense of order and austerity would not have permitted them to participate in gambling and the various wonderful forms of self-indulgence that were evident in this resort. Across a massive archway in several languages were variations of the phrase, Festival of Paradise, apparently the name of the resort. Shall we investigate further? Boomer asked. By all means, Boom Boom, by all means. Accustomed to seeing aliens only on occasion, Starbuck and Boomer eyed with some fascination the various examples of inhuman and humanoid life. There were tentacled lizards, furry octopods, a grotesque sexpartite set of connected individuals from a species that the two men had heard of only in galactic legend, bulky, hard-surfaced oddities that could be mistaken for rocks if they hadn't spoken and moved. Creatures of all varieties and shapes. However, the majority was humanoid, sometimes oddly so. As Starbuck and Boomer entered a magnificent casino, a feline cocktail waitress, modestly attired in a clinging dress, revealing her 4 shapely breasts, asked them if they'd like anything to drink. When they declined, she smiled and walked away, her furry tail removing a dirty glass from a gilt railing. Starbuck could not take his eyes off her. "Did you see that?" he said to Boomer. "Sure did." At a nearby gaming table, one of the hundreds spread throughout the ornate, cavernous room, a scream of victory went up. Checking it out, Starbuck saw a chubby humanoid raking in cubits with a horse-like paw. Another winner's cry erupted at an adjacent table. "The odds must be incredible here," Starbuck said. "People are winning fortunes, look." After further investigation, Boomer spotted rows of food tables on which delectable items were being snatched at greedily by the game players. "They're obviously well fed here," he said. "Let's get hold of whoever's in charge and see about getting some food back to the fleet." "Hold it, Sky Pirates, slow down. The last thing these people may want to find is a Battlestar sitting on their front doorstep." "Then you think this setup is illegal? Is a Cylon nauseating? Yeah, I think it's illegal. It wasn't exactly listed in the Colonial Guidebook of places to go, things to do. And we're standing here in full uniform. They may not be too happy when they notice that. Let's take off." Wait. Let's not look a gift horse in the mouth, especially when it's dressed in gold. I've never seen a crooked gambling den that didn't depend on military pay vouchers to keep their doors open. Let's see what this guy has to say. A human pit boss came toward them, his mouth spread in a wide smile. "Welcome, gentlemen," he said. "Is that an emblem of the Colonial Fleet I see?" Boomer looked scared, but Starbuck answered confidently. "That's what it is, all right." "I didn't realize they were in the area." "As a matter of fact, we're kind of here on our own." "Little out of the way, aren't you?" "A secret mission," Boomer said, getting into the spirit of the deception. Starbuck slapped him on the back and said jokingly, "He likes to be dramatic. Just a reconnaissance flight. See that the armistice is being observed." They all 3 stood around silently for a long moment. Was the pit boss's grin directed at their naive lie? Starbuck wondered. Or was it just a reflection of the genuine hospitality of the casino? "How worthy," the pit boss said. Starbuck couldn't tell whether or not the man intended the observation sarcastically. "And how fortunate to have you with us. Consider yourselves guests of the establishment. Food and drink on the house." The pit boss snapped his spidery fingers, and Starbuck and Boomer found their hands full of food and drink, supplied by short simian waiters who moved like lightning through the crowd. Starbuck took a sip from his glass. The drink turned out to be a Sagittarian straight arrow. He took a bite of the pastry in his other hand, an Aquarian ambrosia cake. "These are my favorites. My favorite drink, my favorite dessert," Starbuck said. "How did you know what to give me?" "They knew," the pit boss said, pointing to the simian waiters, who were now supplying a creature who looked like a sculpture of plastic, slightly melted. "They're primitive types, the waiters, but they're mildly telepathic, at least in matters of food and drink. Enjoy yourselves." The pit boss smiled and walked off. Starbuck stuffed some more ambrosia cake into his mouth. Moist crumbs clung to his lips. "Well," Boomer said sardonically, "how do you feel now, sport? Here we have the run of this place while our people are out there starving and scrabbling for crops and grazing land." "What did you expect me to do, ask the guy for enough food for a ragtag fleet when he thinks we're just a couple of straggler pilots on a reconnaissance flight?" "Well, maybe we should just tell the guy the truth." "Sure, he looks a swell sort, an honest John. Boomer, until we know who these people are, just keep in mind that it'd only take one informer to have the whole Cylon war machine on its way." "So what do? We've got to find ways to get fuel and food back to the ships. First thing, we'll try to find out who's behind this place. How many qubits have you with you?" "Qubits? Starbuck, you disgust me, you know that?" People in our fleet are half starved, and you're going to gamble? If you expect me to be a miniature Commander Adama, you got another thing coming. Besides, this time it's in the line of duty. We've got to start asking some questions, digging out some information. But carefully. Very carefully. Boomer seemed reluctant to hand Starbuck the money. Well, all right. But you'd better make this last, that's all there is. Boomer dropped 3 cubits into Starbuck's outstretched hand. Boomer, my man, cubits don't mean much just now, no matter how much you measure it. Starbuck's active eyes sought the source of the best action. He decided on the high-low table, since high-low was a game at which he could make a quick turnover of his limited funds before seeking out a big stakes game. 3 people, all human, sat around the table. An open chair beckoned. Starbuck sat beside an attractive woman who, he thought, might have been an absolute stunner if she would just drop a few pounds from her pleasingly plump figure. The other players were men, both cheerful, both quite obese. As he sat, the woman, obviously liking what she saw, gave Starbuck the eye.
"Well," she said, "the fleet's in. Sit down, Lieutenant. You've come to a lucky table."
That right?
Yep, not sure what I mean, whether it's lucky because I've been cleaning up or because you chose to sit here.
Starbuck assumed his best appealing grin and signaled to be dealt in. The non-human dealer, with a friendly smile, began tossing out the next round of cards with an elegant flick of his triple-jointed, gray-green wrist. Apollo ran a check on the other branches of the survey team. Ensign Greenbean got on the line and reported a disturbance. "What is it, Greenbean?" Apollo said. "It's Jolly, sir. We seem to have lost him." "How could you lose anybody his size?" "Beats me, sir, but he's lost." "Send out a search party and report back to me." "Roger." Apollo leaned back against the bucket seat.
"The man probably just wandered off,"
Serena said. "Maybe." He was about to say more when the Tillium detector started beeping. The beeping caused Boxy's Daggett droid to bark.
"Quiet, Muffet. I see it. Captain, Tillium."
Apollo slowed the land ram and checked the indicator. It seemed to display a Tillium load all right, a large one. He brought the vehicle to a slow stop. As soon as it stopped, Muffet leaped out the window.
"Muffet!"
Boxy cried.
"Wait, I'll bring him back."
Before anybody could stop him, Boxy had followed the Daggett droid out the land ram window.
"Should we go after him?"
Serena asked, her voice nervous. "He's in sight for the moment. Let him run free a little."
"You're right. I may be keeping too tight a leash on the boy. Thank you, by the way."
"For what?"
"For saving his life."
"You're getting things a little out of proportion. Anyway, maybe I should be thanking you."
"Now it's my turn to ask. For what?"
"Well, you've helped me to..." He stopped talking as he leaned forward to squint out the window on Serena's side.
"What is it?"
"Boxy. He was there a moment ago."
"Maybe he just ran over a hill."
"Perhaps. But we'd better give a look. Come on." Serena became frightened by the agitated way Apollo scrambled out of the land ram and onto the carry-on surface. Cetal emerged from her ground concealment and in one rapid move swept Boxy and Muffet into her four-armed grasp. Before the boy could scream or the animal could emit one of his disgusting sounds, Cetal had carried them back to the camouflaged ground entrance and onto a pod which she immediately activated to descend into the ground to the Tillium mine below. In the corridor leading to the Queen's chamber, the boy struggled fiercely. As Cetal tried to improve her hold on him, the animal leaped out of her arms and ran a short way down the corridor.
"Muffy!"
the boy cried.
Darn you, Daggett, come back here!
Immediately the animal obeyed. Cetal, unused to domesticated animals or their robot substitutes, was impressed with Muffet's quick obedience. She picked it up again, and both animal and boy were serene until they had been carried into Lote's throne room, where Muffet again scrambled out of Cetal's arms, this time to run to the throne. It barked furiously. A slave seemed to want to kill it, but the queen was too amused. The sharp spikes upon her body had faded to a soft yellow, as they always did when she was pleased. Boxy squirmed out of Cetal's arms and ran to his animal. The other human in the room took a couple of steps forward, and Boxy looked up at him.
"Lieutenant Jolly!"
Boxy cried.
"What are you doing here?"
"I'm not paying a social call, youngster," Jolly said. He glanced toward Lotte lounging on her throne. "I left all my calling cards in my formal jumpsuit, Your Highness." Lotte did not understand the sarcastic humor in the fat man's remarks. Cetal was about to scoop up Boxy again, but Lotte gestured her away, saying,
"Leave him."
Muffy licking his face, Boxy looked up at the queen from a crouch. Lotte raised herself from her throne. The spikes on her body got brighter as she pointed to the child, the fat flyer, and the droid.
"A curious group,"
she said.
"But they will do quite nicely. Cetal, arrange that they be taken care of, and prepare for the others as soon as possible."
Cetal nodded approval and walked to the captured humans. Jolly edged over to Boxy and put his arm around the boy. Cetal was amused by the fat human's obvious fear. She observed even her own race with a cynical eye. She had always liked what she was, but not who she was. Or, for that matter, who anybody else was. Even her love for her queen felt incomplete. No matter how much worship she attempted, it could not be complete unless the queen would love her back. A possibility not even within the scope of Ovian reasoning. Cetal, her forearms suggesting a quartet of elegant gestures, guided Boxy and Jolly out the entrance, Muffet trotting happily behind. On the throne, Lotte began to laugh mysteriously. Cetal never knew the meaning of her queen's laughter. Apollo and Serena searched the immediate area around their vehicle to no avail. Serena held back tears, muttered to herself that she should never have let the child get away from her. Back at the land ram, Apollo got on the communicator to Greenbean, who reported no sign yet of Jolly.
"What is it?"
Serena said.
"What's happening on this planet?"
"Don't panic. We'll find him." Apollo wished he could be as certain as he sounded. For a moment, all he wanted to do was fold his beautiful auburn-haired, green-eyed woman in his arms and soothe her, tell her everything would be all right. The trouble was, he couldn't feel that everything was going to be all right.
"This planet is eerie. With this darkness and the 2 moons, it's... What is it, Apollo?"
Apollo had drawn his sidearm and pointed it toward an area beyond the land ram. Serena followed his look, then screamed. There were 2 Ovian warriors emerging from a hole in the ground, a hole that had not been there a second ago. Their 2 triggered weapons were aimed at Apollo and Serena.